One of the most dangerous things in the world is not ignorance, it's false confidence. The man who knows nothing and admits it can be taught, but the man who knows nothing and believes he knows everything, he becomes a liability to himself and to everyone around him. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He watched fools rise not because they were competent, but because they were confident, not because they had insight, but because they had certainty. He saw that in politics, in courts, in war, the most arrogant men were often the least capable, and yet they held the loudest opinions. This is the paradox. The more ignorant a man is, the more certain he becomes. The more competent a man is, the more cautious he is. Why? Because wisdom includes doubt. Intelligence includes nuance, but stupidity is simple. Stupidity speaks in absolutes, and that absolute confidence fools people. It fools employers, it fools voters, it fools the man himself. The fool doesn't stop to ask, "Am I right?" He assumes it. He doesn't slow down to reflect. He speeds up to convince, and the world, drawn to certainty over depth, follows him more often than it should. Machiavelli would have called this not just ignorance, but strategic blindness, because the man who thinks he's smart is more difficult to confront than the man who knows he isn't. Why? Because ego blocks him. Ego protects his fantasy, and when the ego is large enough, no amount of truth can break through. This is what makes the fool dangerous. He is not slow, he is loud, he is persuasive, he is popular, and because he believes in himself so completely, others start to believe too. They confuse certainty with competence, and the fool rises. Machiavelli saw this unfold across city-states. Leaders who lacked depth but projected strength. Generals who knew little of war but radiated confidence. Advisors who had no wisdom but wore the robes of intellect. The people untrained to detect substance fell in love with appearances. They followed the strong voice, not the strong mind. And so the fool rules. Not because he deserves to, but because the wise man hesitated. The wise man thinks twice. He checks himself. He says, "I might be wrong." He plays with complexity, and in doing so he sounds unsure. In a world that rewards simplicity and speed, this is mistaken for weakness. The fool offers clarity, even when it's false. He simplifies complex ideas into slogans. He turns nuance into noise, and because people crave simplicity, they eat it up, they believe it, they repeat it, and the lie becomes a movement. This is the danger Machiavelli warned about. When power is awarded not to the best, but to the boldest. So what do you do with this knowledge? First, you stop being surprised when stupid people rise. You stop asking, "How did he get there?" You already know. He got there because he believed he belonged there, and the world believed him. Second, you stop waiting for people to reward your intelligence. They won't. They will reward your confidence first, your clarity second, your intelligence only after they've already followed you. That's the Machiavellian twist. You don't win by being the smartest in the room. You win by appearing the most certain. And if your intelligence doesn't translate into influence, then all you have is private insight. No impact, no position, no throne. You must learn from the fool not to become him, but to outmaneuver him. Take his certainty, but back it with substance. Take his simplicity, but build it from complexity. Take his energy, but guide it with wisdom, because that is the ultimate combination. Clarity on the outside, depth on the inside. The reason so many stupid people think they're smart is because they've never been challenged. No one holds them accountable. No one confronts their ego. They live in echo chambers, surrounded by applause and insulated from correction. That is your advantage. You doubt, you ask questions, you see flaws. That discomfort, that's awareness. That's what makes you dangerous. If you learn to project confidence over it, because power isn't held by those who wait until they're ready. It's held by those who act as if they are. So take the lesson. The fool believes he's brilliant, and the crowd believes him until the cracks show. But the strategist, he becomes brilliant. He builds it in silence, then presents it with confidence. And once he does, he doesn't just match the fool, he destroys. Once you understand how fools rise, you can stop being bitter about it and start using it. You stop wasting energy on outrage. You stop trying to correct every idiot with an opinion. You stop playing the moral professor. Why? Because you realize the fool is not your enemy. He's your contrast, your shadow, your warning. And if you're smart, you study him. Because the fool doesn't win alone. He is supported, elevated, protected, not by reason, but by momentum, by groupthink, by emotional loyalty, by people who are not following him because of truth, but because of identity. Machiavelli knew this better than anyone. He understood that masses follow emotion, not logic. They follow the man who makes them feel safe, even if it's a lie. They follow the man who speaks in absolutes, even if it's fiction, because absolutes remove doubt, and doubt is uncomfortable. That's how stupid people win. They offer certainty in a world full of noise. And the moment you understand this, the question shifts. It's no longer, why do they follow him? It becomes, how do I speak so that they follow me? And the answer is not become like the fool. The answer is, speak with the same clarity, but rooted in depth. Most intelligent men lose influence because they explain too much. They speak in layers. They hedge their points. They present both sides. It's thoughtful, but it's also exhausting. The average person doesn't want to process nuance. They want a conclusion. They want direction. They want confidence. And if you won't give it to them, the fool will. This is what separates the thinker from the leader. The thinker knows the answer. The leader knows how to deliver it. And if you want to rise, you must become both. You must learn how to reduce complexity into clarity, how to speak without apologizing for your certainty, how to say this is the way without offering 10 disclaimers. That's not arrogance, that's leadership. The fool uses this to mislead. You will use it to clarify. Because the world does not belong to the smartest. It belongs to the clearest. And clarity, when backed by real competence, is unbeatable. This is what Machiavelli would have taught the modern man. Be wise in silence, but decisive in speech. Study in private, but move in public. Doubt quietly, but lead loudly. The crowd will not follow your process. They will follow your certainty. So use it, because the only thing more dangerous than a stupid man who thinks he's smart is a smart man who refuses to lead. The fool is not your threat if you position yourself properly. He becomes your stepping stone. Let him stir up the crowd. Let him attract attention. Let him speak first, because the longer he talks, the more exposed he becomes. The more promises he makes, the more cracks appear. Your job is to wait, listen, then strike with clarity, logic, and timing, because people follow what works. And when the fool fails, the crowd looks for something real. If you've done your work, you will be ready, but you won't get this chance if you stay silent. Machiavelli knew silence was powerful, but only when strategic. Silence used to observe is useful. Silence used to avoid risk is cowardice. If you never speak, they assume you have nothing to say. If you never move, they assume you have nowhere to go. And then the fool owns the room. You must interrupt the pattern. Speak simply. Speak confidently. Speak with an outcome in mind. Stop correcting everyone. Correct the perception. Stop over-explaining. Frame the narrative. Stop debating the fool on his level. Win the crowd by rising above it, because perception rules, and the man who controls perception controls the room. This is why fools rise, not because they are brilliant, but because they are believable. Now imagine what happens when someone brilliant becomes believable. That's the formula. Think deeply, move sharply, speak simply, and when the moment comes, don't hesitate, because fools rise fast. But the man who rises slow and smart, he stays. There's a reason why it's so hard to argue with a fool. Because the fool doesn't care about being right. He only cares about winning the moment. He doesn't listen to understand. He listens to reply. He doesn't revise his views. He doubles down. And the more you try to reason with him, the more he sees your doubt as weakness. Machiavelli would have laughed at the modern obsession with educating the ignorant. He would have asked, why are you teaching someone who doesn't want to learn? Why are you wasting truth on those who prefer lies? This is where many intelligent people go wrong. They believe logic is enough, that evidence will open minds, that if they just explain it clearly, the fool will change. But fools don't change. Not until they're embarrassed. Not until they lose. Not until the pain of being wrong outweighs the pride of being loud. Until then, they remain confident. They remain stubborn. And worst of all, they remain popular, because the crowd doesn't see intelligence. They see conviction, and conviction is magnetic. This is why the smartest man in the room is often overlooked, and the fool is cheered, because the fool doesn't hesitate. He speaks before thinking, he moves before measuring, and that momentum, even when it's wrong, creates followers. People crave certainty more than they crave truth, and the fool by nature is certain. But that certainty is fragile, because it's not built on knowledge. It's built on ego, and ego, while loud, cannot handle challenge. It panics when proven wrong. It lashes out when exposed, and eventually it cracks. Machiavelli would tell you, never interrupt a fool while he's destroying himself. Let him talk, let him lead, let him promise. Let him climb, because every step upward makes the fall more painful. Every word adds weight to the moment he fails, and when he does, when the crowd turns, the man who was silent but sharp becomes the alternative. That man is you, but only if you've been watching, preparing, waiting. The mistake most intelligent men make is trying to correct the fool mid-climb. But correction is not strategy. It's therapy, and strategy requires restraint. You must not only be right, you must be right at the right time. Timing is everything. So what do you do while the fool rises? You observe. You collect receipts. You study the weaknesses. You track the contradiction. And when the time is right, you act, not emotionally, but surgically. You don't debate him. You replace him, because the truth doesn't need defending. It needs presenting, clearly, confidently, at the moment of maximum impact. And once you do, the dynamic flips. The same crowd that cheered the fool begins to shift. Because people don't stay loyal to error. They stay loyal to strength. The moment the fool looks weak, they look for something better. That's your moment. And if you've played it right, you don't even need to attack. You just need to show up, calm, clear, composed, and the contrast will do the work for you. The real danger is not that fools exist. It's that wise men waste time on them instead of building themselves. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He knew that trying to convert the masses was a fool's errand. You don't change minds. You change momentum. You shift perception, and perception shifts power. So here's your task. Stop explaining. Start framing. Stop correcting. Start building. Stop debating. Start demonstrating. Because the man who thinks he's smart will talk endlessly, but the man who knows he's smart will let results do the talking. This is how you outplay the fool. Not by joining his game, but by changing the arena. By now, you understand that the fool's power comes not from brilliance, but from boldness. He speaks louder than the rest, moves faster, claims certainty while others are still thinking. But here's the tragedy. The longer a fool stays in power, the more damage he causes. Not because he's evil, because he's unaware. He oversteps. He oversimplifies. He creates systems he doesn't understand and breaks ones that worked just fine. He gives advice with zero reflection. He leads others into blind decisions. And because he still thinks he's smart, he never stops to correct himself. Machiavelli warned us about these men, not because they were malicious, but because they were dangerous through ignorance. The man who thinks he's wise but isn't is a weapon pointed at his own people. This is why intelligence in a Machiavellian world must become more than knowledge. It must become protection. You do not win by being smart. You win by weaponizing that intelligence into power, timing, and control, into optics, into restraint, into long games that fools will never see coming. Because the only thing more powerful than loud stupidity is silent precision. Stupid people who think they're smart always move fast. They always speak first. They try to dominate every room with noise. And that works, until they run into someone who plays the long game. Someone who isn't trying to win arguments. Someone who's trying to build empires. That's you. The fool wants to be seen. The strategist wants to be positioned. The fool wants to win attention. The strategist wants to win outcomes. This difference defines power. The fool uses certainty to compensate for weakness. You use clarity to reinforce strength. The fool reacts. You calculate. The fool makes noise. You shape direction. And eventually, when pressure mounts, only one of you will remain. Because when fools are finally tested, when the stakes are real, when the spotlight burns, when the mask cracks, they break, they panic, they deflect, they blame others. Why? Because their confidence was never real. It was armor for insecurity. It was a lie repeated so often. They believed it themselves, but pressure doesn't lie. It reveals. Machiavelli knew that when the time comes, only those who have built real competence survive. Only those who have remained sharp, even in the shadows, will have the composure to lead through fire. The rest, they vanish, quickly, quietly, forgotten. This is why you must be patient. Let the fool rise. Let him take the spotlight. Let him stumble. And while he shines briefly, you build, you grow, you position, you strengthen your network. You learn how power moves, not in theory but in consequence. Because true influence is not about being seen today. It's about being needed tomorrow. And that requires restraint. The man who thinks he's smart always overplays. He doesn't understand leverage. He rushes his plays. He shows too much too soon. He reveals his motives. He signals his insecurities. He talks about his plans instead of letting the results speak. Don't be that man. Be the man who speaks when it's time. The man who listens twice as much as he talks. The man who learns in silence and executes in precision. The man who isn't distracted by noise but watches it, tracks it and uses it when it matters. That's power. Not volume, not visibility, not followers. Precision. And once you hold it, once you understand the power of knowing more than you say, of acting before you're asked, of controlling perception instead of being trapped by it, you don't just outlast the fool, you redefine the route. Because when you finally step in after all the noise has settled, your words carry weight, your silence speaks, your restraint intimidates, and everyone who followed the fool, they shift, quietly, instinctively, because they see something different now, something stronger, something real. And the man who thought he was smart, he disappeared. The final phase of stupidity is delusion, not ignorance, not arrogance. Delusion. The man is so far removed from reality that he genuinely believes he is the genius in the room. He explains what he doesn't understand. He lectures people who are 10 times more competent. He corrects those who weren't even wrong. And worst of all, he thinks he's helping. Machiavelli would have had no sympathy for such men. Not because they were evil, but because they were unteachable. You cannot reach a man who has closed his ears while opening his mouth. You cannot upgrade a mind that refuses input. And in power, that's not just irritating, it's fatal. Because stupidity, when paired with influence, becomes destructive. The fool with no power is annoying, but the fool with a following, the fool with a microphone, the fool with a throne, he's dangerous. Because he will give commands that feel smart, but collapse under pressure. He will make promises with no plan, and he will drag others into chaos while still thinking he's right. This is how kingdoms fall. Not from treason, from incompetence. Machiavelli warned rulers to surround themselves with men who were both loyal and intelligent. Not one or the other, both, because loyalty without competence is dead weight. And competence without loyalty becomes a threat. You must build your empire with people who think, but don't overstep, who see clearly, but don't chase credit, who ask hard questions, but remain committed to the mission. The fool does the opposite. He surrounds himself with flatterers, with yes men, with people too afraid to tell the truth. And in doing so, he creates a bubble, a delusional palace, where his worst ideas sound brilliant, and where bad news never reaches his ears until it's too late. This is the consequence of unchecked stupidity. It multiplies, it creates culture, it sets tone, it becomes contagious. People stop thinking, they stop questioning, they repeat slogans instead of challenging ideas, and the entire structure becomes fragile, built on the illusion of confidence rather than the substance of clarity. Machiavelli's advice here is brutal, but necessary. When you see this pattern, cut it. Cut quickly. Cut completely. You cannot afford to let stupidity sit in your ranks. You cannot afford to allow delusion to masquerade as strength, because one wrong voice at the table can destroy a decade of progress. So what do? You lead with discernment. You test intelligence, not just charm. You reward results, not noise. You create an environment where truth rises, because truth is more valuable than agreement. And in yourself, you audit constantly. You catch your own delusions before they grow. You stay open to correction but firm in decision. You challenge your own certainty, so the world doesn't have to do it for you. Because the moment you stop asking questions is the moment you start playing the fool. The smart man doesn't always feel smart, but he stays sharp. The fool always feels smart, and that's what makes him dull. So now ask yourself, are you seeking truth or applause? Are you surrounding yourself with thinkers or with fans? Are you tolerating stupidity because it's louder than clarity? Because if you are, Machiavelli would not see you as a strategist. He would see you as vulnerable. One whisper from a fool can unravel everything you built. If you're not paying attention, this is the final warning. Incompetence is louder than intelligence, but it is weaker. If you hold the line, if you remain sharp, silent, and strategic, then no fool can take what you've earned. But if you grow lazy, if you grow soft, if you let the mask of certainty blind you to reality, then one day you won't be reading about the fool. You'll be the one others are warning about. This is the final warning and the final advantage. Fools always think they're winning, right up until they lose. They don't see the cracks forming. They don't feel the tension rising. They miss the signs. And when the collapse comes, they're shocked because they built a false world and they lived inside it. Machiavelli didn't fear the fool. He feared what happened when others started believing him, because that's how fools become rulers. Not on merit, on momentum, not on truth, on repetition. But just because they rise fast doesn't mean they last. History is filled with loud men who vanished, who ruled for a moment, then faded. Why? Because confidence without competence is a time bomb. It impresses for a season, then it explodes. That's why the strategist doesn't rush. He doesn't compete with the fool on speed or noise. He moves with patience, with structure, with proof. Because he knows that in the end, the crowd wakes up, the illusion fades, the mask slips. And when it does, the strategist is already in position. That's the long game, and it belongs to you. You've watched the fool rise. You've seen him mislead. You've watched him draw attention, gain followers, command rooms. But now you understand, he was never powerful. He was just fast, and fast power dies when the wind shifts. Your power, on the other hand, is rooted. It's built on reality, on clarity, on self-correction, on depth. That kind of power isn't popular, but it's permanent. It isn't explosive, but it's unshakable. And over time, It crushes the shallow confidence of fools. This is the final transformation. You stop fighting stupidity and start surpassing it. You stop being the corrector. You become the alternative. You stop waiting for the crowd to value intelligence. You build so much value that the crowd follows you by default. That is the Machiavellian way. Quiet, strategic, inevitable. So what does this look like practically? It looks like fewer arguments and more positioning. It looks like choosing silence over petty debates. It looks like becoming so good, so focused, that when the fool finally fails, there's no one else to turn to but you. It looks like replacing noise with direction, replacing ego with structure, replacing impulsive certainty with calm, proven control. And when that moment comes, when the fool is exposed, your moment begins, because power always shifts. And the man who is ready, not the man who is loud, is the man who inherits it. So let the fool talk. Let him tweet. Let him posture. Let him claim victory too soon. Let him burn himself out in public. Let him peak too fast. You don't peak. You ascend. And when the time is right, you speak once, and it lands. You move once, and it changes the game. Not because you were better liked, but because you were better built. That's the final irony of the fool's journey. He thought he was ahead, but the only man ahead is the one who finishes. So now I ask you, are you done watching? Are you done correcting? Are you done being the intelligent man who's always 10 steps ahead, while the fool collects applause? Then let the world know. Comment, let the fool burn. I'll still be here. Say it without hesitation, because you've studied the pattern. You've seen what Machiavelli saw, and now you're not just smarter, you're prepared. Go watch the next video. The fools won't see it coming, but you've been planning it all along.